Hello, everybody. This is Flea Market Fantasy number 15, the podcast that reviews random Bronze Age comic books. I am your co-host, Mike-DELL, and as always, I'm joined by
Mike-DELL of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
That's right. And this week, once again, we have a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, special guest?
Well, I'll introduce him. I'll introduce him.
There you go.
Okay.
Let me handle this. Our guest this evening is a longtime fan favorite of the LCS Hockey Radio Show. He hosts his own little fake radio show on the LCS Hockey Radio Network.
Oh.
Called The Original Janksters. And he's also my personal accountant.
Wow.
This man has kept me out of prison more times than I can count. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. The one and only Kevin Jank.
Hey, everybody.
There he is.
So I guess that's not a secret identity. I can call you, like, everyone knows that you're Kevin, right? So I can call you Kevin?
Well,
yeah, that's fine.
Jank is cool. Call him Jank.
Jank. All right.
I'll answer to you.
And let's get some background info on you, Jank, in terms of comic books, because I know you're a big comic books fan. We always talk comic books when you come on the LCS show. When did you start reading comic books? What's like your earliest memory of comic books?
I mean, I had probably in the 80s a handful of random comics, but they were all like, He-Man, Thundercats, that kind of thing. And just be like a
Nice.
single issue here and there. It wasn't really until the 90s that I really got into it. And I think what actually started me was the X-Men cartoon show.
Oh, okay.
That show, I loved it so much that I was like, I need to look into these X-Men. And so one year for Christmas.
Let's just remind everybody, Jank, you're a little younger than Mike-DELL and I, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm about 10 years younger.
Yeah. So he's like Tuffy, Mike-DELL. He's in a different generation.
So you're an accountant. He's a lawyer. I am doing nothing of the sort. Nothing nearly as successful. But anyway.
Mike-DELL, you're hosting 12 comic book podcasts.
Yeah, that's true. Just about. That's true. You're talking about the ledge. All right.
You're the world's expert on Quasar. That's that's got to get you all kind of tail.
What the hell? So what happened to you on Christmas, Jank?
So I think this was probably like 1992, I want to say. There was one of those catalogs, like Sears catalog or something like that. Yeah. They had this special deal for it was like 15 X-Men related comics from that year. So I got that for Christmas, and I was super excited, read them all. It was a couple X-Men, Uncannies, a little bit of X-Factor and X-Force. And so I loved the shit out of those. But then soon afterwards, something happened where I got a Pog maker.
A Pog maker. Now, for those who don't remember what Pogs are, please explain.
Pogs were a stupid thing where they were just like little cardboard discs that had pictures on them. And I had this maker thing that had basically it came with blank Pogs that had a sticky side, and you could put anything you want on there and it would kind of trim the edges and stuff. So you can kind of imagine what happened to most of those comics.
Yeah, so those comics got turned into Pogs.
Yeah, that's sad because I ended up rebuying all of those issues again later.
Mike-DELL, were Pogs a thing up in Canada?
They existed, but I just never got into them, I know that
we were a little older, so yeah.
Yeah, and also there was a time in the mid 90s where comics kind of the market crashed, and it was like everyone kind of splintered off into other hobbies, and a lot of people went into Magic the Gathering, a lot of people went into Pogs, but I just stuck with comics, the whole way through. So
yeah.
That was a good choice. I think the Pog phase lasted probably a month, but
yeah. You invested hundreds.
Boy, did it cost me a lot of things.
Yeah.
It destroyed all of Jank's comic books. So Jank, what are you reading these days? What's your favorite books to read now?
I've cut down quite a bit. There was a time, especially right around the Civil War era of Marvel, where I was reading most of the books Marvel was putting out, but nowadays, I'm down to just a couple. Amazing Spider-Man, I still read that. Daredevil. Immortal Hulk's pretty good, speaking of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So, you have been reading Hulk for a while, though. You used to read these Peter David Todd McFarlane run on Hulk back in the day, right? You bought them all and stuff?
Yeah, well, I actually got into it at the very tail end of it. I want to say my Hulk started with, there was like near the end of Peter David's run, there was a thing where it was like an X-Men crossover where the Hulk became the Horseman of War, I believe it was, for Apocalypse.
Wow. Okay.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So I checked that out and I really liked it. And I kept reading Hulk through the end of Peter David's run. And I was just like, this is so good. I need to go back and get all of it. So basically, I went back and got everything back to 300, which was even before he started. But all that stuff kind of leading up to his era. And,
I should make it clear to everybody, this episode of Flea Market Fantasy, we will be reviewing The Incredible Hulk number 334, written by Peter David, drawn by Todd McFarlane. Now, Mike-El, what's your history with Hulk? Because it seems like you've read Peter David as well, right?
Oh, yes. So I was first exposed to the Hulk through the Bill Bixby TV show, right?
Yes.
Which I still watch. Me and my brother are going through the whole series right now. We're on like season 3. I still love that show.
Nice. And hey, Mike-El, real quick, one thing I learned about that TV show when I was researching here today, do you know that TV show is kind of the reason why She-Hulk was invented?
Oh, because they wanted to like kind of cut him off at the pass before they could create a She-Hulk or a female version of the Hulk, right?
Because they came out with the Incredible Hulk, and then you had the $6 Million Man, and then they came out with the Bionic Woman, and Stan Lee was like, they're going to try and rip off the Hulk, so let's hurry up and get a She-Hulk in production, and they ran it out there, and that's why we have She-Hulk, because of the Bill Bixby show.
And I believe it was literally drawn on over the weekend.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, and if I actually have that first issue, and it's one of those ones where there's only like 4 panels per page because they were just John Buscema was banging it out as quick as possible, just to get it on the stand. So had it out by Tuesday anyway.
You read more
right there
beyond the TV show. Like you cared about Hulk in the comics as well.
Yes, right? Then there was the cartoon, the early '80s cartoon, and then once I started buying comics on a regular basis. I had a couple issues. See, the key thing about Peter David is he was the first writer I recognized by name, because every once in a while I'd be reading a comic and I kind of knew, I accepted that comic books had, more wooden dialogue than like the average TV show. And whenever I'd read a comic with good dialogue, I always remember noticing it was always by Peter David, right? Because he was writing Spider-Man at the time, and he was writing the Hulk and maybe a few other things. So that's what made me kind of notice him. And then once McFarlane, I think McFarlane started in the same issue or one issue after him or something.
I think it was like a bit after. Yeah.
Yeah. So once he started, like right away, I was in love with McFarlane's art. So I kind of followed them for, a few issues here and there. And then when McFarlane went to Spider-Man, I followed him there. And then my brother is actually the one that collected Hulk. So I read it from around 330 something all the way up to at least 400 and something, So yeah, I was a huge fan. I just love that whole run. But this early, what's that? 20 of your favorite runs?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like this early era when he's the Gray Hulk is absolutely my favorite. Just love it, I wish they would have kept that kind of that status quo.
Just to clarify the point you made about them starting, David started on Hulk with issue 328, and then he skipped 329 and 330, but he came back for 331 through 359 originally, and Todd McFarlane started on 330. So kind of right around the same time.
That's right. They kind of, gotcha.
But anyway.
And I'm also in the middle of rereading them. It's a weird coincidence. I started rereading them this year. So right now I'm up to like the 360 something or whatever. But yeah, so this is perfect.
I have no history with Peter David whatsoever. I think I probably read some of his X Factor stuff. I think.
Also incredibly good.
Really good.
Yeah, like I only had a handful of them. But I seem to recall he did that. And we'll get into his career later on. Yeah, but I'm excited about this is my experience with Hulk. I really wasn't a huge fan as a kid, just occasionally, whenever he crossed over a Spider-Man or something. I think I only own about 3 Hulk issues, and one of them happens to be the issue 340, correct, Jank, where he fights Wolverine? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Pretty sure it's 340.
Yeah.
One of the greatest covers ever.
But here's what I didn't realize when I was researching the Hulk here for this big fake radio show. I didn't realize that initially the Incredible Hulk was canceled.
Yes, number 6.
Yeah, they only did 6 issues. Stanley and Kirby did the first 5, and then Steve Ditko drew issue 6, and they canceled it after 6 issues.
Right.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
He's also the second Marvel superhero, I believe, right? After Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right about that.
Yeah.
And the inspiration for him was because Stanley knew that everyone liked the Thing, and he thought people always felt emotional connections to like monsters or like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo. So he's like, oh, I want to create another little monster character. So and he said he'll do something like Jekyll and Hyde kind of, and so he came up with the Hulk. So after the 6 issues and they got canceled, Hulk would appear in other stuff while he went to the Avengers, and he started appearing regularly in a book called Tales to Astonish.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then at issue 102 of Tales to Astonish, it just became the Incredible Hulk.
Yep.
That is very confusing.
There's a lot of that going around back then, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They just
Captain
take
America.
books over and make it something else.
Yeah,
So-
Thor did that. Yeah.
So technically, if you want to read, say, issue 98 of the Incredible Hulk, you're really reading 98 of Tales to Astonish.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Never knew that.
Numbering has always been confusing, even before
And-
they started relaunching books every year.
Right.
And that started in 1968, where he got his own book. He took it over from
Right.
Tales to Astonish. So there's like a 5-year run there where or 4-year run where he's bouncing around to different things.
Right.
And then he got his own book. So, all right. I guess that can bring us to this issue here, issue 334, called Grave Circumstances. Grave Circumstances. I wanted to say consequences. Circumstances. From 1987.
Roll off the tongue quite as well.
From 1987, Incredible Hulk. And Jank, there are a lot of characters in this book that I had no idea who they were. Holy hell.
Yeah, that's for sure. A lot of them didn't quite last, but some of them did.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the status quo of the Hulk at this time?
Yes, because
Probably should.
first of all, Jank, if I'm correct, you wanted to pick well, we were talking about what issue to pick, and I was thinking something in the 70s, and you're like, well, I didn't read that, but you read in the 80s with Peter David. So I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And then you're looking for stories. Why did you settle on 334?
Well, I was trying to look at the
Hello?
ones from like 87, and a lot of them were really hardcore part of a storyline, like an ongoing thing with the leader or something like that, or part of like a multi-parter with X Factor and stuff like that, where this one was kind of as close as we could get to being self-contained. Although it's even at that, it's not that
Yeah.
self-contained.
So tell the kids what's going on with Hulk at this time, Jank. Like, what's happening here? Because he's the Gray Hulk. He's the Gray Hulk.
Yep. This is the Gray Hulk. He recently, so shortly before this, he got back from being banished to this limbo-like place by Doctor Strange because he was just wild. And he came back home, and they finally managed to separate the Hulk from Bruce Banner, and he married Betty after all this time, and things were looking great until they
Now,
realized.
I got a question here.
Yeah.
When you say he separated Hulk from Bruce Banner, because this is brought up a lot, like he just got him out of his mind, right?
They physically split them into two beings.
Yes. See, that's where I was confused.
Yeah.
So-
it gets
so
even
Hulk-
more confusing from there.
So Hulk existed and Bruce Banner existed as two separate beings.
Yep. Which became a problem very quickly because they realized, oh shit, neither of these are complete beings and they're both dying.
Huh.
Yeah. So they kind of had to reintegrate them again. But of course, when they tried to do that, things went awry and it didn't work out so well. I believe like Thunderbolt Ross was trying to monkey with it because, you know, he hates the Hulk so much. And Rick Jones tried to stop him. And in doing so, he ended up falling into the nutrient bath that they were using for this whole thing. So he ended up becoming the Green Hulk, while Bruce Banner was left as the Gray Hulk.
Yeah, Rick Jones became kind of like a skinnier version of the Hulk with long hair.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I got so many questions. All right, but Gray Hulk returned in Hulk 324, written and drawn by Al Milgrom. I know that much. So what's the difference, Mike-EL, between Gray Hulk and Green Hulk? Summarize it for us.
Well, Grey Hulk is based on the first appearance of the Hulk in Hulk #1. So when he first appeared, he was gray and he was intelligent. He could speak in full sentences. He was a little bit weaker. And he also Bruce Banner turned into the Hulk at sundown rather than because of, getting angry or whatever.
Like a werewolf.
Yeah, exactly, like a werewolf. Now, if you go back and read those the early issues, there's no cutoff. It's kind of a gradual thing where first it's the moon, then it's this radiation gun that Rick Jones shoots him with, and then eventually it's anger. But what they did was they basically decided to make it like this Grey Hulk is a separate personality, separate power level, all that stuff, and the Green Hulk is dumb and stronger, basically.
I think they refer to the Green Hulk as Savage Hulk.
Yeah. Right. Later on, around like 393 or something like that, there was this whole thing, this like backup feature that Peter David wrote about like the psychology of the Hulk and about how like I think the Green Hulk was like the id, the Gray Hulk was like his ego, and Banner is the super ego, and it was really well thought out and cool, and I loved it. He put a lot of thought into this character.
Fair enough. Yeah, and also when he was the Gray Hulk, there was a time where he was like a enforcer in Las Vegas. Joe Fixit?
Right.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting.
It's shortly after this.
Yeah. Right. It's like the next era. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. There's a lot going on here. Yeah, Gray Hulk physically is a little smaller than Green Hulk, right?
Right.
Yeah, he's not nearly as invulnerable. Like he heals, but he's not like as impenetrable as the regular Green Hulk.
Yeah, because when he was fighting Wolverine was hacking him up.
Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome.
And also I saw somewhere where it said interesting, like he looks more monstrous in the face, like his head's a little more distorted, where the Green Hulk kind of looks more human in the face, yet he's more of a savage. I don't know.
Yep.
That could be. Yeah, it might just be who drew him, right?
Yeah, that could be. And he kind of just seems more gaunt, maybe just because he's not as muscly. He's just more like a skeleton with bigger muscles, where he just kind of looks a little freakier.
Huh. All right. Fair enough. So that's the Hulk. I have still so many questions, but we brought up a couple names there. You mentioned Thunderbolt Ross. Now, I believe he was like the army general who was always after the Hulk, right?
Yep. Betty Ross's father.
Yes. And then he eventually become the Red Hulk?
Yep. Many years down the line, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is still one of the stupidest things that they've ever done, is they were like, there's this whole mystery about who is the Red Hulk. And they're doing all this stuff, and he looks basically just like the Hulk. He's red, but he's got, this black hair and stuff like that. And he unhulks himself, and you find out it's Thunderbolt Ross, but he still has the mustache. But when he's the Hulk, he doesn't have a mustache. But then later on, once they've revealed his identity, all of a sudden now he has the mustache when he's the Red Hulk. It's like you can't have it both ways.
The only history I have with the Red Hulk is Marvel Avengers Alliance, Jank. Remember that game?
Yeah.
Red Hulk was on there. That's all I know about him. And also, you mentioned Betty Ross, who is the Hulk's Bruce Banner's lover. They're his girlfriend. Yep. And they did get married at some point, right?
Yeah, shortly before this issue. It was within the last 15 issues.
And she was married before Banner.
Yeah. She was married at least once.
Glenn Talbot.
This Ramon guy that we see in this one, he kind of alleges that they were married.
Yeah, I got to talk about Ramon. You got to talk about Ramon. But first on Betty. So Betty's his girlfriend, is then his wife, but she also, Mike-El, Betty Ross, she turns into the Harpy.
Oh boy, I don't remember that. When was that?
Jank, do you remember?
That was probably 70s era.
Yeah, that was earlier.
It was a long time ago. And now she's actually back as that again, but like a red harpy.
Yes, now she's the red harpy.
Yeah, because she was dead. She was killed in what, like the
the end 90s? Of Peter David's run. Yeah,
right.
She died of radiation poisoning.
Okay. Well, first she became the Harpy, which is like this green creature with wings, and like the Harpy of lore, the old mythology Harpy, that kind of stuff. And then she became the Red She-Hulk.
Oh.
And then she became the Red Harpy.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I'm with you.
And dude,
it's too much.
Yes, it's too much. And then when I was looking up all the Hulk stuff, there's like 30 different Hulk variations.
Oh no.
Yeah.
There's a Dark Hulk, a Green Hulk who's also smart and he's like a doctor or something. And then there's just
yeah,
so
that
many
was when
Hulks.
they merged like the three Hulks, like Banner, the Green Hulk, and the Gray Hulk. Doc Samson, like, did some kind of psychological mumbo jumbo. It's like hypnotherapy. They kind of merged all three of them into this Professor Hulk.
Now,
just
Jake,
like regular Banner.
You just mentioned another name, Doc Samson, who's in this issue. Mike-El, do you know the history of Doc Samson?
Only from what I've read in the Peter David run, but I do know he was exposed to gamma radiation, and he is super strong, not nearly as strong as the Hulk, and he keeps his intelligence, and he doesn't change back and forth, and that's it. He has normal skin, but he has green hair. That's pretty much all I know. Oh, and he's a psychologist.
Yeah, and his first appearance was Hulk 141. Now, Jank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Doc Samson was trying to save Betty Ross, who had turned like a crystalline form. Is that correct?
I never read his first appearance, but that sounds right.
I just feel so bad for this Betty Ross lady. She's been through hell.
She really has.
Yeah.
She's got a bad picture of men.
So he was trying to save her, and the process, like they were taking gamma radiation out of the Hulk, and they needed it to cure her, and they ended up curing her. But then Doc Samson said, "Hey, my machine still has this gamma radiation. Let me try something." And he turned into a superhero. He became big and strong.
It's all good psychologists do.
Yes, you always got to experiment on yourself. So that's Doc Samson. He has like a ponytail, and he's a bigger guy. He's all strong now. So yeah, and apparently there's a base, Gamma base. Is that like their headquarters of operations?
Yeah, this is basically the Army had this whole branch, dedicated to tracking down the Hulk, which is kind of where they developed this process that split the Hulk and then put him back together. And Banner is kind of trying to work with them because he wanted to get rid of the Hulk just as bad as anyone.
And
so it was weird.
And I'm sorry, but part of that team on Gamma Base with Doc Samson, the Hulkbusters, Jank.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in this issue as well. And I guess they were a team Samson put together to try and capture the Hulk?
Yep. And they would go on to be changed into supervillains by the leader after this. Holy
hell. Mike-El.
One guy paralyzed now because of his last run-in with the Hulk. He gets turned into this guy, like, surrounded in rock, who just kind of floats around.
Oh, really right. What are their names again?
I think Rock is the guy's name.
Was it
I think Rock and Redeemer.
Or something. Oh, yeah, okay. Not very poetic, but anyway.
Two other names we got to talk about here. Well, three others, actually. Rick Jones, we mentioned him before. He's Hulk's little sidekick. Mike-El, tell people the history of Rick Jones.
So Rick Jones is the most annoying character in the Marvel universe. He started out as a supporting character in Hulk #1. When Bruce Banner was testing his gamma bomb, Rick Jones and his friends happened to be out playing in the desert, 20 feet away from where they were doing it. And was that an exaggeration?
I believe, Mike-El, that Rick Jones and his teenage roughneck pals, they had a bet that Jones said he would drive out where they're going to test this atomic bomb because he's not scared. And then his friends didn't show up. And he was out there by himself, right, Jank? Isn't that how it went down?
Yeah. He's just out there playing the harmonica.
Yeah, playing the harmonica. That's right, in his Jeep, I think. And then Bruce Banner saw him on the display or whatever. So he wanted them to stop the countdown for the bomb, and he ran out to save him. But then I think it was it a Russian scientist or was it a bad guy or somebody didn't?
Yeah, one of the guys in the group, one of the scientists was actually a Russian spy or something. So he made sure that the bomb went off anyway.
Didn't he end up being a villain named like not the Goblin, but something like that, some kind of supervillain name? But I don't remember. But anyway, so then Rick Jones also got exposed to the gamma radiation, and I don't think he turned into anything at first, but Obviously, it affected him years later. But then he had this weird history in Marvel where then after that, he joined, I think it was the Teen Brigade in the Avengers, right? So he hung out with the Avengers for a couple years. Then
he was the one who assembled the Avengers to begin with. He was the one who sent out the call.
Right, good point. Okay, true.
Yeah, because he wanted them to get the Hulk, right? Or he would to warn them about the Hulk. Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, because Loki had done something to the Hulk or made them think the Hulk was bad, something like that.
Okay.
Or he was mind controlling them.
And then you got to wonder why they didn't just create new characters. But then he ended up becoming the sidekick of Captain Marvel, the Marvel.
Before that, Mike-El,
before that he was sidekick. Yeah,
Captain America. Yeah,
before? Okay.
Yeah.
So he was he like the second Bucky, or was that later?
Second Bucky.
Okay.
Although they didn't really call him, Jank, did they call him Bucky, or he just wore Bucky's outfit and everything? But I don't think they called him Bucky there, right? So.
Yeah, they probably didn't call him Bucky, but he definitely had the same outfit.
Yeah, he was Bucky. Yeah, he's like the Jason Todd of Robins. I guess you could say. All right, so then but then Captain Mar-Vell, Mike-El, explain who this is, a Kree guy, right?
Oh boy, so I actually just read the entire series this year as well because I'm nothing better to do. So anyway, it was a cool idea. He was a spy sent by the Kree. He was sent to spy on the human race, and then basically he just instead he ended up becoming kind of a good guy, and it's really vaguely defined, but he had negabands, I think, didn't he?
Yep.
Yes.
And then it was weird because basically every 3 or 4 issues they would just completely reboot him, and like then after a while, after a few issues, actually no, he's gonna exchange places with Rick Jones, and so Rick Jones would do something, and then he would disappear, and Captain Marvel would appear, and then vice versa, and then he'd come back, and then that went on for a little while, and then he got kind of rebooted again, and I don't know. He was never really successful, and then eventually, in the early '80s, Marvel just decided to kill him off. So they gave him cancer, killed him.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this is Captain Mar-Vell, not Captain Marvel. That's a distinction there.
Well, he was Captain Marvel. Yeah, the book was Captain Marvel, and his name was Mar-Vell, which is just like a coincidence, I guess.
So. All right, I guess that's all we need to really know about Rick Jones. 2 other names. The villain in this issue is a fella named Half-Life, and this is his first appearance.
Yep, sure is.
And maybe we'll get into him a little later. And then there's also a guy named Ramon, which I mentioned. This is like Razor Ramon's less charismatic, annoying little brother. Ramon.
Sounds about right.
He's like the cliche of every Latin lover cliche you can think of.
Yep. Yeah.
Ramon. He's bedding down with Betty in this issue. But they didn't do anything.
Well, they just talked. Yeah.
Yeah, they just talked.
That was the big cliffhanger at the end of the issue before. Was like, they kind of met up and you're like, oh no, what's going to happen here? But then in this issue, we find out, they just talked.
But apparently Betty and Ramon used to date in a period of time where the Hulk was missing. He was off the planet somewhere, and she thought he was dead. She didn't know where he was. So she dated Ramon during that period. So,
yeah, a lot of ups and downs in the relationship of Bruce and Betty.
Now, Mike-El, after reading this issue, will you go back and acquire all the issues with Ramon, just so you can have the whole arc?
It's already on my list.
Already. Just wanted to make sure.
The first appearance of Ramon's got to be worth $100.
Yeah, it has to be worth it. Unless you made pogs of it, and then it's worthless.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to the issue, Grave Circumstances. Mike-El, why don't you start off? Tell us what's going on here in this issue.
Sure. So basically, this helicopter is flying above, what are these called? These called like these butts? Like
buttes or butts.
Buttes? Is that what it is? Buttes? I don't even know. These giant
or butts.
I like butts better.
Buttes. I guess it's butte. Yeah. These rock formations out in like the desert, and he's on top of one. He's inexplicably on top of one. So he gets rescued by this helicopter. And
Mike-El, you skipped a page, Mike-El.
Skipped a page.
True.
There's a first page before this, though.
Well, yeah, no. Oh, wait, is there? Oh, geez, yeah. I started on the splash page. I apologize. Yeah. So first, we're in a graveyard, and we see something dig its way out of it, out of one of the graves, and then basically there's another guy standing there, and he's like, "You're late," and then the guy says, "Yes, well, I've had a lot of practice."
And that guy will be revealed as Half-Life later on in the issue.
Right. So that's like the prologue, right?
Yes.
So the prelude.
Prelogue, prologue, prelude. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
The prequel. The Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But it is a prologue from literary references, yes. It's a prologue.
So yeah. Show that you actually did get that literary degree.
Yes, just to show that I do have the degree. But yeah, so the big splash page is the buttes or the butts or the rock statues, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I like this though because it kind of shows that the Gray Hulk is constantly at odds with Banner. Unlike the Green Hulk is just kind of dumb and randomly changes whenever, but like the Gray Hulk's constantly plotting against Banner. Like in the issue before this, he got really really drunk, so that as soon as he changed to Banner, like Banner would be super drunk and wouldn't be able to do anything all day. And in this one, he jumped up to this high butte so he could basically strand Banner there all day because he just doesn't want him messing up things and trying to get rid of him.
Yeah, I do like that. That is good. Because like we mentioned, the Gray Hulk, he only turns into the Hulk at night. So when the sun comes up, he's Banner again. So the Hulk always has to think of ways to prevent Banner from messing with him. So he leaves him up here on this big rock. And Mike-El, some helicopter fellas come around and they rescue Banner. Take it away, Mike-El. Sure.
All right, so then, so Bruce Banner calls up Doc Samson, and what does he do here? Does he try to? I have to reread this page to remember what he asked.
He's trying to convince Samson that the leader knocked him out and left him on top of this rock because he doesn't want Samson to know that he's still turning into the Hulk.
Right.
No one knows.
He's telling a tall tale here. And then and so basically
a bad example for all the children reading.
Yeah. And so it's a weird status quo at this time, as we said. It's kind of cool because it is a self-contained story, but I love how there's all these little subplots going on. So in the next page, we drop in with Betty and Ramon, which we already talked about, how, we were all aghast because we thought maybe they slept together, but thankfully they just stayed up all night and talked. Right.
Yep. Ramon is fully clothed. Betty is fully clothed.
Yep.
And
good stuff.
There's a whole lot of exposition on this page in thought bubbles.
Yes.
Yep. There is.
Holy fuck. Yeah.
Dialogue heavy.
Yes.
And then we skip ahead to Doc Samson over at Gamma Base, and they've got what's his name, Rick Jones, and this giant contraption. I guess they're still doing tests on him to make sure that he's not the Hulk, right? The Green Hulk.
Yeah.
So he's supposed to have a clean.
Doug Henning reference in this scene.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes, he does. Yeah, Rick Jones makes a Doug Henning reference, letting you know that it is 1987.
Come at me with a saw.
Yeah, like he's going to be cut in half by Doug Henning.
Oh, gotcha.
Now, Mike-El, you remember Doug Henning, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, he's a famous magician. So you had no idea that reference. You had no idea what that meant.
No clue.
Well, see that's the trouble with you Canadians. You're not up on your American magicians.
Magicians. That's at the top of the list.
That's like the first thing to learn here in school.
Yeah.
You know what I love about this contraption is how Rick Jones's entire body is, inside of it, except for his head. It's just kind of dangling out the top of it.
Yeah, like an iron lung.
Yeah.
And Rick Jones is jacked. I thought he was supposed to be a little guy.
Yeah, he is.
He is huge.
I think that's the only way McFarlane knows how to draw guys.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And if you're a professional sidekick to superheroes, you got to be in decent shape.
I guess. Yeah, that's true. He probably bulked up over the years. Got on the HGH and the steroids. Yeah. All right, I see. All right, Mike-El. So then we see Bruce Banner, because again on the TV show he was David Banner.
Yes.
He's Bruce.
Which they did try to account for that in the comic eventually by saying that his first name is David, but his middle name is Bruce, and he goes by Bruce.
Who gives their child Bruce as a middle name?
David Bruce Banner.
I think you know what? I think that it was actually slightly different than that. I think it was Robert Bruce Banner. Because I think in the first appearance he was Bruce Banner, then it was Robert Banner, then on the TV show it was David Banner. But I think they tried to fit them all in there somehow.
Well, the only reason they introduced Robert to it was because Stan Lee fucked up one time and called him Bob in an issue. And he also did the same thing with Spider-Man. He didn't call him Peter Parker. One time, what did he call him instead of Peter, Mike-El? Do you remember, like, issue 3?
Oh, yeah. What was it? I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but he screwed up there and didn't call him Peter Parker, but then they just forgot about it.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, I don't know.
That's why he made so many alliterative names, I heard, just because he couldn't remember them.
Yeah.
So he was hoping that would help.
Because, again, he was writing, like, all these books at one time, so, yeah, I don't blame him. It's crazy. So, anyway, Bruce Banner shows up at the Gamma base, Mike-El.
Right. And then we have, what's that?
Well, then we get to the city morgue where they're wheeling in Half-Life.
Right.
I don't know why is this here? I don't understand.
I don't remember either.
You gotta transition somehow, I guess.
But I don't know. This is aggravating reading it because there's no point for him even going to the morgue, or we get this other doctor with all his internal thoughts and his concerns, and I don't know. There's no point to him going to the morgue, is what I'm trying to say. Half-Life, but anyway.
I don't remember offhand, but I'm guessing that the events he's talking about happened in like the earlier issue or something along.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is I recently read them and I don't remember if he's referring to specific things that happened. I have no idea.
But you know what still wouldn't make sense? Half-Life having to go to the morgue, because then the next time we see him, he's just driving around the desert in a dune buggy. All right. That's fine.
Maybe he stole that dune buggy from the morgue.
The morgue.
There you go.
That's their version of a hearse in their beach town.
So then, Mike-El, we see a dinner scene with the Hulkbusters.
This is the Hulkbusters, yes. So we're checking in with the Hulkbusters. We're getting some banter between them. Characters who are quickly, very soon after this, written out of the book who we'll never see again. Well, I guess they're brought back as villains, right? Or is this it?
2 of them are.
Some of them are, yeah.
Okay.
So like the older people, I don't think they ever come back in any kind of fashion.
Yeah.
Well, I did like the scene where their Hulkbusters are talking about like how bad they suck at going after the Hulk, and they're like, "We never busted anything. Like we got to figure out something new to bust now, though." And they're like, "I know 3 colleagues that are going after poltergeists."
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of future in that. I was like, "Oh, that's good."
They retrain, the miners to work in solar energy. It's kind of the same thing, right?
But it's a Ghostbusters, a sly Ghostbusters reference.
Yeah.
Peter David. And then, Mike-El, probably the most bizarre scene in the whole book. We get, one of the Hulkbusters says, "Hey," because Bruce Banner shows up and he's asking where Betty is, his wife. And they're like, "Oh, well, I hate to do it, but I passed along a message that Ramon wants to see her, and I haven't seen her since." So Ramon's probably giving it to her good right now at some hotel. And so Banner and Rick Jones, is that his name? Rick Jones?
Rick Jones, yeah.
Come on.
Still got his harmonica.
I was thinking of Rick James. I was like, wow, that is 2 totally different guys. Although Hulk would be much better if Rick James was Hulk's sidekick instead of Rick Jones. So they show up at this hotel, and they're trying to get the room where Ramon is, and they barge in on him. And he sees Ramon and Betty on the bed. Well, Ramon answers the door, and he's like, "Hey, get out of here. She doesn't want to talk to you." Mike-El, what the hell's going on here?
You mean with the argument?
Yeah, because Banner just shows up, and he's like not even worried at all that she's at a hotel room with some strange man. Seems perfect.
It is kind of weird. I think they've had a strained relationship, and they've been estranged for a while. I don't really know. Yeah, maybe they're supposed to show how aloof he is. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's just part of Banner's character, where he's so used to turning into the Hulk anytime he gets mad that he's got to try to keep his emotions in check.
Oh, that's a fair point.
Which is also, I think, kind of one of the things that led to the Hulk in the first place, is when he was a kid, like his dad was an abusive, douchebag. So he kind of suppressed all of his emotions just to not turn into his dad, and then he ended up turning into the Hulk. So I think that's just a part of his character.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Jank. That would make sense why he's so accepting, because he doesn't want to Hulk up. All right, that makes sense, but it still comes off very awkward. And all right, so then they have a big fight, Mike-El. Ramon wants to fight Banner, but what happens? Who steps in?
Rick Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uses his martial arts training.
Yes.
It's a very awkwardly drawn fisticuffs, which we can talk about later. But yeah.
Oh, we're going to talk about this art later. Yeah.
Yeah.
That jump kick's pretty great.
It's worthy of Captain Kirk, I would say.
Yeah, is that really a kick, or is he like dancing?
I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. But it's got some force behind it. Look how far Ramon goes, right?
Yeah.
Not on TV. Anyway.
Because Rick Jones is all hopped up on that HGH and steroids. He's huge. So then the great thing is after they make amends and they need to get back to Gamma Base because it's Rick Jones is like, hey, it's going to be dark soon. You better get back to the base. And Banner's like, not before I take my wife upstairs and do her good. And he carries her up the stairs.
Or at least he tries to, but it's not going very well. Yeah. She wants to walk.
Oh, man.
See, now we're back at the morgue. Here we go.
Yeah, for 3 panels. And we see Half-Life guy choke the doctor. But why?
He probably needed more tissue, I guess, because he absorbed stuff. So he probably needed, something more physical.
Why didn't he just absorb the guy who found him and wheeled him in? You know what I mean?
Do we find out who wheeled him in?
It was just a intern or whatever. You know what I mean? Okay. Just a guy wheeled him into the office. But someone picked him up on the side of the road. Why didn't he just get those guys? Why didn't he get the intern? Why? This just is like a convoluted way to just add more drama that there's no point to it.
True.
Anyway,
have drama.
So then we see Rick James or Jones at the bar, and he's the super freak, and he's looking at the clock, and he's like, "Uh-oh, it's getting dark already. What's going on? It's like an hour too early." And the bartender's like, "Hey, don't you watch TV? We had to turn the clocks back." Hey,
every superhero's worst enemy: daylight savings time.
Because again, Banner's going to turn into the Hulk when the sun goes down. So Jones goes running to save him. And then we get back to the hotel room, Mike-El, and we see Betty fully clothed on the bed. Banner's fully clothed, he's standing next to the bed. And she's like, come back and cuddle a little bit longer. So they got this hotel room for themselves. They went upstairs and they just snuggled. That's nice.
Kind of fishy, eh?
Well, maybe they put their clothes back on after having sex. It could happen. Maybe it didn't last very long.
Yes, it sure didn't. That's the good thing about daylight savings time. I guess it really makes it seem like even shorter. I don't know. But that's too bad. So they're hugging each other and getting all lovey-dovey still, being all sweet. But what happens, Jank?
It's nighttime, so he starts hulking out. And
that's right.
Turns into the Hulk, goes out the window, and we don't really find out in this issue if Betty's all right. We just see Rick Jones and be very concerned.
Yeah, Jones is yelling, "Somebody, get a doctor!" And then we see Grey Hulk jumping away, and he's jumping through the sky. And Mike-El, who does Grey Hulk encounter then?
He encounters a dune bug riding Half-Life.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So he lands and does one of his patented claps, which creates vibrations and knocks the dune buggy over. And then now we finally see what's his name, Half-Life in all of his glory, right?
Yes. Yeah. Describe what he looks. Describe what he looks like, Mike-El.
Like kind of like a zombie, I guess, but not this zombie. Yeah, like there's no skull, but he's really skinny and kind of gaunt, and he's got this stuff hanging off of him, and he's kind of green, right? So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, when you say there's no skull, there's a head there, but it's like a human face, not
right. Yeah, he doesn't look like people think of a zombie. They think of like half of a skull hanging out or a jaw, but no, he's relatively normal.
Well, Hulk does knock his jaw off, but then
but that's right. He
puts it back on. And also, he's making lots of literary, or at least 2 literary references that I noticed right out of the gate. And so I'm like, what the hell's going on here? But it turns out later he was an English professor.
Right.
Yeah. And then he makes a Romeo and Juliet reference later.
Oh, right.
And Jank, what is
for those? Anyway.
Yeah. And then Jank, what is Half-Life's abilities? Like, what can he do to the Hulk?
He's able to absorb energy, especially gamma energy. So he is basically siphoning off the Hulk's strength and adding it to his own, making the Hulk weaker and making himself stronger. So usually the madder the Hulk gets, the stronger the Hulk gets, but now it's just making Half-Life stronger.
Ooh, look at that.
It's pretty great. I like that.
Yeah, so his way of attacking the Hulk is, well, he does punch him once, but then he just jumps and hugs him.
Yeah.
It's like a little monkey.
Just making sweet, sweet love to his belly button right there.
So then the Hulk finally gets him off him. He just throws him off him, and but he snaps him right off of his arms and legs. So the arms and legs are still clinging to the Hulk, but the body and the head of Half-Life go flying through the desert. And then he picks up the arms and he rips them and throws them away. And then he leaves Half-Life alone, and Hulk escapes. But what else do we learn here, Mike-El, about Half-Life?
Is that his origin is tied into the Hulk because he basically became Half-Life because of the this is where, so he says it's because of a recent bomb, but I think I'm mixed up on continuity. So he doesn't mean, so he says here, wait, where is it? He says New Mexico. No, that was in Colorado last year. So I'm not sure what he's referring to. Do you know, Jank?
Yeah. That's a good point. I'm assuming that was something that the leader was testing out before he actually ends up dropping a whole gamma bomb about a year later.
Yeah, at first that's what I thought it was, but it was like, no,
Yeah.
that was after this. So.
Yep. Yeah, this was definitely before that whole Middleton thing. So
Okay.
I'm assuming this was more of just a test. Like he was.
So it's kind of like foreshadowing that. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
It's definitely
Banner,
dropping hints of what's to come.
but Banner still feels guilty because it's gamma radiation and all his work, right, led to this.
Right.
So-
Right.
Yeah, he definitely created the gamma bomb initially. So whoever created another one is going off of his work.
Okay. Yeah, so I like that there's because otherwise this whole Half-Life thing's bizarre. But yeah, that worked out. Like, all right, there's the motivation for having him here. All right.
Yeah,
And
there's hooks there. Keep
and-
involved.
then at the end, the issue just ends with Banner. He's now Banner again because the sun came up and he's hiding out in a cave. And you're just thinking, I feel bad for that Half-Life guy. Sure hope he's okay or whatever. Or he finds some peace, even though he's a grotesque zombie who I just ripped his limbs off of. And then in the final panel, you have some vultures circling over Half-Life.
Yes.
And that's how the book ends. And now, Jank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the leader comes along and saves Half-Life, right?
Yep, and gives him a fancy new suit so he doesn't have to be naked from now on.
Oh,
always
thank God. Don't want to see that zombie dick flopping around. All right, here we go. All right, so let's get to the creators here. The writer, we mentioned Peter David, born in 1956 in Fort Meade, Maryland. He worked in the book publishing business, and he was always trying to be a writer, but he didn't have much success. I think he sold one sci-fi story, but he could never seem to get his foot in the door. So he got a job. He spent 5 years in the Marvel sales department. And while he was there, he editor Jim Owsley, who was in charge of the Spider-Man, who was in charge of the Spectacular Spider-Man at that time, which I believe is called Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. He liked David. He always treated him nice when they worked together, and he knew David wanted to be a writer. So he said, "Hey, let me see some of your stuff." And he bought an issue of Spider-Man there from David. And then David became the semi-regular scripter for Spectacular Spider-Man. He did 21 issues total. And I just lost my notes here briefly, so I'm going to just wander around aimlessly until I find them again. He did 21 issues from 105 to 136, including the 4-issue arc, The Death of Jean DeWolf, in issues 107.
Isn't it DeWolf?
DeWolf.
Wait a minute.
That's just how Mike-DELL says it.
DeWolf.
Weird Pennsylvania talk.
DEWOLF. DeWolf.
The wolf, like you mean like the animal, like the wolf, right?
Yes.
So, how do you say it? Wait, how do you say it?
DeWolf.
Wait. Jake, how do you say it?
DeWolf.
Yeah, like, am I crazy? It's the wolf. It's not the woof. Like, woof is the sound a dog makes. Woof, woof, right? So it sounds like you're saying the woof.
Dog says woof, woof.
Yeah. This is wolf.
James DeWolf.
Okay. Whatever. Okay, we should just move on. All right.
It's a robot situation. Just let it go.
Yeah. Cultural differences.
All right, so Jank, this is apparently an acclaimed run, this 4-issue thing.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
I believe it's like a murder mystery, right? Like
classic.
Spider-Man's trying to figure out who murdered this police lieutenant or something, right?
Yeah, she was one of like the few cops who kind of liked Spider-Man and they had a good relationship.
All right, so there you go. So that put David on the map, and but he was fired from that title due to conflicts backstage, conflicts of interests behind the scenes, because people were mad that he was involved in creative and in sales, like other creators. They're like, well, he's just going to promote his own books, like through the sales department, you know. So Jim Shooter he kind of put some pressure on Owsley to fire David, and that's what happened. So then but not long after that, Bob Harris offered, even though David was still working in the sales department, Bob Harris offered him the Hulk job because Hulk was not popular at the time and no one else wanted to do it. Which
sounds all right.
But that sounds crazy. Why would someone turn down writing The Incredible Hulk? But yeah, so David's like, all right, I'll do it. And he started with.
I mean, he was a well-known character, especially with the show from the 70s and stuff like that. It's not like he's, Moon Knight.
It's not like he's Quasar. The Hulk. So David started with issue 328, like we mentioned earlier. Then he did 331 to 359, and then 351 to 467. All told, a 12-year run with the Hulk.
It was incredible. By far the best Hulk run of anyone ever.
I agree.
Length, but quality. It's all just excellent.
He's also my favorite Spider-Man writer. I got to add that in there.
Now keep in mind, this issue we're reading, it's very early in his career.
Yes. It's like the third comic he's ever written.
Well, he did more than that. He did.
Okay, yeah. He was already on Spidey.
The third Hulk.
Yeah, Spider-Man was first.
Yeah. And I mentioned earlier, he also did X-Factor. He did X-Factor Volume 3, issues 1 through 50, and then 200 through 262. So that's quite the run on X-Factor as well.
He had basically left X-Factor in like 1992, and then they eventually canceled that book. But then in 2005, he came back and brought it back and did a whole other big run on it. And they're both incredible. Some of my favorite comics ever is those X-Factor runs that he did. He made Jamie Madrox the Multiple Man like one of the most interesting characters. Who would have thought that was possible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wasn't Quicksilver on his teams too?
He was at first,
yeah.
Okay. Because I know I read something when Quicksilver is part of the team. I like that. But anyway, from 2007, 2009, he also did She-Hulk, Volume 2, 22 to 38. So he has a lot of Hulk history. Now, Mike-El, over at DC in 1990, he wrote Aquaman, The Atlantis Chronicles.
That's right.
A 7-issue limited series. Now, he also wrote issues 1 through 48 of Aquaman Volume 5 from 1994 to 1998. Now, Mike-El, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Peter David the guy that like rejuvenated Aquaman and he redid his story kind of and made him cool?
Yeah, Peter David's the one that gave him the harpoon hand. He gave him the long hair. He gave him the beard, the new costume, all that stuff.
Now, as a huge Aquaman fanboy, how do you feel about all that?
Honestly, I did not like it.
Wow.
No, I prefer the orange, chainmail, blonde hair, short, just the classic Aquaman, And it's funny because I love Peter David, but it wasn't until like this year that I finally sat down and I tried to read his Aquaman run. And funny enough, I did not really like it. So I only got like halfway through before giving up. Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
But everything else he's done, I liked. Like I liked X Factor. I liked all that stuff. All the stuff you mentioned, I'm a big fan of. But yeah, I just didn't like Aquaman.
Was it just like the changes that he made, or was the stories themselves just weren't that good?
It was the actual writing. Have you read it before?
No, I've never read any Aquaman.
Yeah, no, because like I like I said, like I've read stuff after too. Like I read his Supergirl run that was good. His Captain Marvel run from the 2000s. Yes. That was so good. It was excellent. Yes. But it might have just been that Aquaman, maybe he was trying too hard to be like shocking and different, and maybe it just didn't fit with him. But like people did like it, but maybe it just wasn't for me. I don't know.
His other prominent DC work, Mike-El, Young Justice,
which I've never read.
Okay, from 1998 to 2003. He wrote all but the first two. He wrote all but two of the first 55 issues. Now, is that like a Young Justice League? Is that what that is? Or
yeah, I think it's like Teen Titans-esque, but I think it's with what is it, Superboy and Impulse. Like, if you're listening out there, folks, I probably sound like an idiot, but yeah, because they turned into a really popular cartoon, but I just don't know anything about Young Justice. So
Yeah, that's funny. They got the Justice League, then they got Teen Titans, and they got Young Justice, like a bunch of toddlers going around.
Justice babies eventually. It'll be just like the Muppet Babies.
Again, this is very early in his career, this is, I don't want to judge Peter. Obviously, he's a great writer if he's been around this, and I take Jank's word for it that this stuff's really good. But this is not good. This is not good.
It's not work, but it's not bad.
I don't think it's bad.
It's bad. Like, the dialogue is atrocious. All the internal thought balloons, the exposition, the stuff with Ramon and Betty, it's garbage. It's so hacky.
Let me point out something here. Before you continue, Mike-DELL, have you tried reading the writer immediately before this, Al Milgrom?
No.
Because it is, have you read those, Jank?
Yes.
They're garbage. Like, if you think this is bad, go back and just read one issue by Al Milgrom, and you'll realize how much better this is.
Here's what's good. Here's what he did that's really good, is the plotting and the subplots and all that. That's all really good stuff. All the big picture stuff involved in this issue is very good. That's good. But like all the exposition and the dialogue and the thought, it's brutal. Just for one instance, here's one example. And again, this is 1987 comic books. I understand it's not supposed to be Dostoevsky. I get it. But there's a panel where when he's calling Doc Samson, he's in that office, and he's looking at the calendar of the girl, and he's getting all horny for that calendar girl. And he's like, why do I like this girl? Oh, she reminds me of my wife, Betty. You understand how bad that is? You know how bad that is?
But I like how it then fades out from the picture of her to the picture of Betty. And
that's great. That's great. The transition, that's fine. But the actual words, that reminds me of my wife, Betty. Do you understand why that's bad? Like, a man would not be thinking, oh, I've been married. All right. I can speak from experience. Not once in my life have I ever thought, oh, that girl looks like my wife, Sherry. No, you would just say, oh, that looks like Sherry. It reminds me of Sherry. It reminds me of my wife, Sherry. But that's the kind of little stuff that is all through this issue that's really bad. It's really bad. Now, I'm guessing like he got better but this is something you see young writers do all the time. So I'm guessing he'll get better. But
one of Stan Lee's tenets was that every comic book is someone's first comic book. Yeah, so I think they wanted you to set that stuff up for new people. So maybe that is just the way they were instructed to write, and it's not just Peter David making mistakes that they were told to do this, but it's just bad. it's not how you want to write. But the big picture stuff about the Hulk leaving him up on the butts or the buttes, and that's all great. So I can see how this would be really dynamic stuff for someone if they're used to subpar storytelling, because he's really planting a lot of seeds here for everything. But again, the Half-Life, that's a hallmark of his stuff, is he always is playing the long game. He'll set up stuff that you don't think is ever going to pay off, and then like 50 issues later he'll pay it off.
Kind of like David Lynch.
A little bit.
Yeah, because Mike-El, I forgot to mention in his introduction, Jank's been appearing on our show every week to discuss Twin Peaks with us.
Really? Yeah. Oh, I wish I would have known.
So we're into season 3.
Oh boy, okay.
10, I believe.
Halfway through.
Yeah, halfway through.
Nice.
But anyway, so I don't want to be all judgmental on Peter David here, but I did not enjoy this writing at all. I thought I will say this: I like the writing a little bit better than the art.
Well, before you even get to the art, I just got to say that my first Peter David Hulk comic that I bought off the stands was, I think, 337. Okay, and that's with X Factor, and that was going to be the one that I was going to pick coming up, and now I'll hold it off a little bit. But the writing in that comic, and I'm not just talking about the plotting, I'm talking about the dialogue. The dialogue was so good. Yeah, that's what made me become a Peter David fan. Oh, sorry, it was 336. That's what made me become a Peter David fan. So I can only say that compared to the comics I was reading at that time in 1987, the dialogue itself is what stood out to me.
I agree. It was definitely.
That's more of an indictment against the other comics than it is praise for this, I would say.
Well, yeah, you could say that. But now here's the ironic thing is the last couple weeks ago we talked about Jim Shooter. Did you know that Jim Shooter, he did not think Peter David was a good writer, and he didn't think he deserved to be writing Spider-Man?
I can understand
Wow.
it. If this was an example of what he was doing at the time, yeah, I completely understand.
Go and read Spider-Man in the late 80s, okay? And I want you to compare Peter David to Tom DeFalco, to Roger Stern, to David Michelinie, all the guys that were writing Spider-Man at the time. I really think Peter David's writing was better than all of them, but that's just me.
I agree.
Yeah.
Seconded.
I'm just looking through some more stuff here.
Speaking of, I'm looking through the actual comic. I have the issue in front of me, and there's a profile on Jim Shooter in this book.
I know. I did read that. Yeah, I remember that profile when I was a kid because that was in all those issues. They would do these, what was the bullpen bulletins, and they had a profile for Shooter. Yeah. And I remember that profile from when I was a kid. But yeah, I read it again. Yeah. It's
just a drawing of him that doesn't show his face at all. It's just neck down.
Here's my favorite part of it. Did you read it, Jank? Did you read the profile?
Yep. I know my favorite.
My hobbies are I like to run, lift weights, and ride motorcycles. According to Playgirl magazine, I'm one of the 50 most eligible bachelors in America, and I'm continually trying to prove it. I think that gives you all the insight into Jim Shooter you need, right?
Oh, what a guy.
Yeah, but I still love Shooter. still great. All right, so yeah, Mike-El, we'll have to read Peter David again later in his career.
Sure.
But of course, that'll be out of the Bronze Age then, so you have to start another podcast.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
The 90s podcast, I'll be all over that.
Yeah, I did not like any of this. Anyway, all right.
Oh.
Now let's get to the art.
Sure.
This will be something. The artist is Todd McFarlane. You may have heard of him.
I've heard of him. Yep.
He was born in 1961 in Calgary, Alberta. Now, this angered me because I never realized he was born in Calgary. Now, I know you guys aren't hockey fans, but he would go on to be a minority owner of the Edmonton Oilers. And he would design a third jersey for the Edmonton Oilers, which people will universally pan and they call it robot sperm. If you've ever read it. Yeah. It was a terrible logo, terrible design.
Okay.
It's like an oil drop with a machine gear on it, but it looked like robot sperm. All right, so, but when you're the Battle of Alberta, the Flames and Oilers, that is like a huge rivalry. He's born in Calgary, yet he's an Oilers fan. That tells me he was a bandwagon jumping on the Oilers Stanley Cups of the 80s and shunning his hometown boys, the Calgary Flames. So, fuck you, Todd McFarlane, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Well, couldn't he just been a Gretzky fan? Couldn't that been it?
That makes it even worse.
I think it makes it better.
Gretzky's garbage, and he's a Calgary fan. He should hate Gretzky. That's terrible.
I'm looking at this logo. You're talking about the one. It's like it looks like what is that called? Like a nut with like a piece of oil in the middle, like a drip of oil in the middle. Yeah, gear. Yeah.
Like gear.
Yikes. Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah, people hate that logo. All right.
That's kind of like a robot sperm.
So anyway, while still in college, we got another hockey story to talk about later with him, but while still in college, McFarlane sent 30 to 40 submission packages to comic book editors each month, mostly pinups, and he got roughly 700 rejections. And this is great advice, though, for you kids out there who want to be writers or artists or whatever. But I had a writing teacher named Tim Assayas, and he was published all over the place. But he said, don't worry about getting acceptances. What you want to do is collect as many rejections as possible. That's all he cared about. Every month, he totaled up his rejections, and he wanted to get as many as he could. And because eventually, someone will take you, Mm-hmm. But so he didn't worry about that. He worried about the rejections. Get as many rejections as you can. And you know how I know it's great advice? Because I don't follow it. For you kids out there, do what McFarlane was doing, because that is brilliant. Just keep sending stuff out. So don't worry. Don't get discouraged with everyone gets rejected. Don't worry about it. Rejections, collect them. Paper your room with them. Don't worry about it. All right. So
worked pretty good for him.
Yeah, it did, because DC editor Sal Amendola, he was one of the guys that responded to, usually you just get form letters, but every once in a while you find some kind people who actually give you advice and critiques. And Sal was one of these people, and he actually sent McFarlane a dummy script And he said, here's what you do. You start working on your storytelling, your page by page. Enough of these pinups. Mm-hmm. Start working on your continuity and your storytelling. Mm-hmm. So taking that advice, that's what he did. And McFarlane put together a 5-page story using the characters from the comic book Coyote. Remember we talked about this, Mike-El?
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yes. Now, Jank, do you remember this Coyote book published by Epic, the Epic line of Marvel?
No, can't say I remember that one.
Yeah, I never heard of it, and I was having trouble even finding info about it anywhere. So, but
I have nearly every issue. Continue anyway.
But you never read them, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah. So he sent that into Marvel, and who did he send it to, Mike-El? My beloved Ann Nocenti.
Really?
Because she was the editor of the X-Men books, or at least Uncanny X-Men at the time, or an assistant editor, I think. Okay. But anyway, she got it, and she took his submission, and she gave it to the editors of Coyote, and they passed it along to Steve Englehart. Englehart liked it, and he gave McFarlane a gig at doing a backstory in an issue of Coyote.
Wow.
So look at that. Well, his perseverance paid off. Perseverance wins. Just keep doing it. Keep sending that shit in. All right. So then McFarlane, after that, his first regular gig was DC's Infinity Inc. from 1985 to 87, Mike-El. Do you know anything about Infinity Inc.?
Yes, a little bit. It was kind of like a sequel book to Justice Society of America. It was mostly made up of their children. So like 2 of them were Green Lantern's kids. One of them was the adopted son of Hawkman, I think. And it was just kind of like and it was all set in Earth 2, right? So it wasn't main DC continuity. So, and Infinity incorporated all the superheroes like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman were all old and had gray hair, or they were dead. And these were their kids basically carrying on the tradition. So that was it.
All right. So did you ever read any of his stuff that he drew?
I read a few issues. Yeah, it's funny because if you don't like this Infinity Incorporated stuff is much worse. Okay, very sloppy. But I will say one thing, that he redesigned a couple of the characters. Like I think he designed the new costumes for Dr. Who was it? Hourman and Dr. Midnight, and you can tell that he has a completely different sense of design than all the other like traditional superhero artists at that time. So that was really cool. You know.
In 1987, he drew the final 3 issues of Batman Year 2. I guess it was a 4-issue arc in Detective Comics. Is that right, Mike-El?
That's right, yeah.
And how did you like how he handled Batman? Did you read those?
Yes, I think the 2 out of the 3 were inked by Alfred. I can't remember his name, but Alfredo Alcalca or something. And this guy is known for having a very overpowering inking style, and so it doesn't really look like McFarlane. But I think in the last issue, he inked himself, and it looked really good.
Oh, okay. So then he did Hulk 330 to 334 in 1987 to 88, and he also did 336 to 346. So what is that, like about 15 issues of Hulk? And after that, he quit, and he got the gig as Amazing Spider-Man, and he did 298 to 323, 325, and 328. And that was from years 1988 to 1990. And the big notable things about his run on Spider-Man, he brought back the red and blue suit because he told him, like, he was the guy who did it because he said, hey, I'll draw Spider-Man, but I want the red and blue suit because that's the Spider-Man I grew up on. So they said, all right, we'll bring back the red and blue suit. And then he created Venom as well.
Well, co-created, because technically David McFarlane conceived of the character. McFarlane designed the look.
Yeah. So there you go. Venom. And then he wrote and drew the Spider-Man issue, the series, because he became such a rock star that he wanted his own book. And he said, I'm leaving Amazing Spider-Man, and I want my own Spider-Man book that I will write and draw. And he did the first 14 issues of that. That started in 1990, and he also did issue 16. But then he quit, and Mike-El, he started Image Comics with a bunch of other writers or artists who thought they were writers, and they were misinformed.
Yeah.
Yes, they were severely misinformed.
Schedules all went out the window.
Yep.
And even the term artist could be put in quotes for some of them. But
it's true. That's another story.
I fell.
So they Image Comics, of course, he created Spawn, which is probably the cornerstone character of Image, right? Like that's what
it's the most famous one, yeah.
Basically their Spider-Man.
this year basically became the longest running creator-owned comic. He got like the world's record now.
Yeah.
Because they reached issue 300.
Yeah, it beat Cerebus.
Wow, how about that? Yeah, he drew the first 15 issues, then 21 through 24, 26 to 34, and issue 50. All right, so those are basically all his notable works in comics. Like, he doesn't have a huge storied career like, you know, some of these guys. You know, your George Perez, your John Buscema, your you know, John Romita Sr.
True. He
Like,
even stopped drawing Spawn at a certain point.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
he doesn't do a whole lot of art these days.
The difference is that he was probably the first household name, like, outside of comics. It seems, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was so big, and then it was probably Jim Lee, then it was probably Rob Liefeld. But those three are the rock stars that formed that, you know, founded Image, right? So that's his big claim to fame.
Yeah, they just became so hugely popular at that time. And but it says something about American culture, and I think the Americans in general, that two of those three names, Liefeld and McFarlane, really aren't that great of artists, yet they're the richest artists in the world in terms of comic books.
Well,
I don't even hate Liefeld.
Whoa. Wait.
We're going to have a follow-up to this all about Rob Liefeld, okay?
All right.
But I just got to say this about McFarlane. When I was what, 12 or 13, I thought he was a genius, okay?
I loved it. When I was 13, 14 years old, I loved McFarlane. I had those Spider-Man issues. Loved it.
Right. But I think the thing is can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Speechless. I think the thing is if I were to go back in time to like 1987 or whatever, I would say Todd and Rob, you guys have talent, but you need to go to art school for like 3 to 7 years and learn how to draw anatomy and learn how to like be consistent and, you know,
panel composition.
Yeah, like just I think the thing is like looking at this, it's clear that he has like a nice sense of design and, you know, the way he draws machinery and experimental layouts, but he's just his anatomy is all over the place and he's really sloppy. And he did get better. Like when he relaunched Spider-Man in 91, like he was obviously a much better artist at that point. But the problem is he never improved after that because all of these Image artists, they stopped trying to become better artists and they started drawing more like themselves and exaggerating their own weaknesses. You know what I mean? Like Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, it's like someone like Rob Liefeld would be like, well, I draw big shoulder pads, so I'm just going to draw bigger shoulder pads and bigger and
pockets.
You know,
lots of pockets.
And, instead of just going,
nasty.
Right, like if you're like a writer or an artist, you want to learn your craft better. But these guys just sort of got into that rut and then never got out of it, I think.
And the one thing I will never draw, feet.
Right.
Well, how many characters have feet? Not that many.
Yeah, it's kind of shameful though when you think of the old era of all these great artists, and they never had any really acclaim or made much money, and then you have McFarlane and Liefeld cashing, and God bless them. You know, now Jim Lee, he's got all the money now, right? But he's really, I think Jim Lee's a really great artist though. He's like top of the line. So
I think he's technically good, but I think McFarlane is much more creative. I'd rather look at a McFarlane comic personally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love Lee. He's right up there with one of my favorite artists.
So what's your take on McFarlane then, Jank?
I like him. I got no beef.
Even this issue?
Some of his anatomy's weird, but I mean, this was certainly not his best. This is very early. I can't say that this is as good as it gets, but even by 340, when you had that Wolverine issue, he was great there. So he's excellent. Got a lot better in the next couple of issues.
And he is young here, just getting his way in the business. And Peter David, when I was researching stuff, reading about Peter David, because they have an interesting relationship, Peter David and Todd McFarlane, which we'll get into here in a minute. But even Peter David said McFarlane was improving when he was working on Hulk, page to page, not even just issue to issue, but page to page, you could see him getting better. So, this is early work. Here's the problem I had with it. Well, again, the anatomy. The anatomy's always been McFarlane's problem. But it is what it is. It's style, whatever. His faces always look like they're made out of putty, and his hands look like, and his ears are big. Just weird. It's just weird. But if you buy into it and just go with it, all right. But
maybe that's why Spider-Mans are so good, because you get that mask covering up all the weird facial features.
Exactly. That's a good point. And he was revolutionary, Spider-Man. He gave him the big eyes, the spaghetti webbing, the exaggerated poses. Tremendous for Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Just brought a whole breath of fresh air into Spider-Man. And he was just so exciting back then doing that stuff. But the thing in this issue, he does, Mike-El, a lot of times when we talk about these old issues, some of the points we bring up about some of the artists, they don't even worry about backgrounds. They just have they'll just throw in a solid color as the background.
Yeah, some cross-hatching.
Yeah, and you see that a couple times here, but he's really, really detailed in his backgrounds. He puts a lot of effort into his backgrounds. That can be good, but it can also be really bad in the sense that it just feels so congested. It feels like the panels they're so suffocating. And especially because there's so much, David puts so much exposition in his dialogue and his thought balloons. Some of the panels are just so crowded. And
That's a good point.
It just feels suffocating trying to read them. It's not an enjoyable experience. I don't know.
I liked it. I'll say he's definitely a way better artist than he is a writer. I tried to read the first couple issues of Spawn this year for the first time, and boy, that was rough.
Yeah.
That was just, the story was going nowhere after 8 issues.
That's true. It was all set up. It was great setup, but it didn't pay off, right?
Yeah.
All those image guys.
Just here, he ran across this guy. Why is this important? No one knows. It's just I don't get this.
All those image fellas thought they made writers obsolete. They thought we can do it all. There's no need for writers anymore. We can do it all. Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a fan of this McFarlane here. But what can you do? But
I think the thing too is that if you ever hear him talk, let's be clear, he's not the brightest fellow. He might be business smart and he might be charming and funny, but he is not a scholar. And I think what it comes down to is he does have talent, but he doesn't have wisdom. He has the talent to be able to draw well, but he doesn't have the wisdom to know what not to draw and what to leave out. You know what I mean? I think that's his problem.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, just not thoughtful.
Yeah. Does he still even draw today? Is he still doing anything?
No, I think he might have drawn Spawn 300, maybe some of it.
Yeah, or part of 301, something like that. I know they made some big story about he was coming back to do part of an issue or something.
Right. Yeah, but no. Other than that, I think he probably just sends out an email with a 5-line plot summary, and then someone else writes it, and someone else draws it. Right.
Yeah. He does a lot of tutorials, I think, online. I've seen a lot of things, videos of him drawing Venom and stuff like that.
I've watched some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I don't want to draw like Todd McFarlane, I still watch them just to try and learn. But yeah, and he did make all that money off the toys, McFarlane toys. Super rich. He did. All those football guys our buddy the Ed was buying, right? The McFarlane's pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a whole empire unto itself.
He's super rich, but there's he was involved in some controversies that we need to discuss, and especially one. We'll get into the Peter David one here in a minute, but a couple other ones. Another hockey one. He got in trouble with my buddy Tony Twist, a former enforcer for the St. Louis Blues, because Todd McFarlane named the villain in Spawn after Tony Twist, and then Tony Twist sued him because the character is a despicable, horrible person, and Tony Twist says, that's damaging my reputation. And so they took him to court, and Tony Twist actually won a ruling for $24 million.
That's crazy.
It's insane. So they appealed it, and they eventually, they were in the courts for 7 years. And eventually they settled it out of court without a ruling, and McFarlane paid Twist $5 million.
Wow.
That seems ridiculous.
You just named him Tony Twint or something. Just change one letter and you're good.
Yeah, his full name was Antonio Twistolini or something like that, but everyone called him Tony Twist as a nickname. And so that got him, he lost all that money. And the $5 million plus all the lawyers and everything. Holy hell. Wow. Kind of a dick move from Tony Twist, too, when we're at it. I mean, what the fuck? Just say, All right. No problem. Whatever. But yeah, so
Yeah.
Connor ruined my opinion of Tony Twist when I found out all this because it's pretty stupid. All right. Also, he got in trouble with Neil Gaiman, Mike-EL.
Yes.
Would you like to explain this?
Well, okay, so to make a long story short, there's a character called Miracle Man, okay? But Miracle Man's original name was Marvel Man, okay? Marvel Man also happens to be the name of a Marvel superhero who later changed his name to Quasar. But that's neither here nor there, okay? So there was a character called Marvel Man in the UK that was an old 50s Captain Marvel Shazam knockoff. The character disappeared. In the 1980s, Alan Moore brought Marvel Man back and basically like changed comics forever by making him realistic and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, he does the book for a few years. Eventually he leaves and then Neil Gaiman takes over. Now, this is where it gets weird. UK has different copyright laws. And to my limited knowledge of how it works, if you write and draw a comic strip in Britain, then you automatically own it. Okay, that's the way I understand it. I'm not sure if it means you own the character, but like if you draw a story, as far as I know, you partially own that story. So I think what happened was the publisher at the time, Mick Anglo, claimed that he owned Marvel Man. So he hired Alan Moore to write it for a few years. So then Alan Moore either became a partial owner of the character or at least an owner of those stories. Then Neil Gaiman took over, so Neil Gaiman became an owner as well. So then the rights all fall apart, the companies go bankrupt, and Marvel Man / Miracle Man is in legal limbo for years. For some reason, Todd McFarlane decides to buy the rights to the character. I think he might have just bought Eclipse Comics and Marvel Man, Miracle Man came with it. I'm not sure. But then basically, he owned the rights to the characters, and he stuck Marvel Man / Miracle Man in an issue of Spawn. Like it might have just been an arm or it might have been a cameo appearance, but he did something. Yeah. Then you were talking earlier about how the image creators they thought that they could replace the writers. Well, McFarlane wised up, and after about 8 issues of Spawn, he actually hired 4 writers in a row to do guest issues of Spawn. And from memory, it was Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Dave Sim, and Neil Gaiman. And in Neil Gaiman's issue of Spawn, Issue 9. Neil Gaiman created a character called Angela. Yes. So then
a couple other characters too.
Okay. Mainly Angela, yeah. So several years go by. I don't know how long, 10 years. And I don't remember what the next thing that happened was, but basically Neil Gaiman decided, okay, I signed this thing that said that I got to own the characters that I created for Spawn, but now McFarlane's telling me he owns Angela and he's creating figures and he's doing spin-offs and blah, blah, blah. So he decided to go to court against McFarlane, but apparently he couldn't afford the legal costs, so he teamed up with Marvel Comics, and Marvel and Neil Gaiman basically fought for the rights of Angela and Miracle Man / Marvel Man in one big case, and eventually they won. And so because of that, Angela became, I think, partially owned by Neil Gaiman and Marvel, but then Angela started appearing in Marvel Comics. And
they made her a secret sister of Thor.
Okay.
Which was just weird.
Ridiculous, yeah. So now Marvel Comics owns Miracle Man / Marvel Man. And to make a very, very long story short, they thought that they had another Watchmen on their hands, which technically they did. But when they reprinted the old Miracle Man stories by Alan Moore, they completely fucked it up. And instead of just publishing the issues that Alan Moore did, they loaded up all the issues with all these backup stories and 1950s reprints and text, and it confused the hell out of everybody, and basically it didn't sell well, and so it kind of sputtered out and went nowhere.
I actually didn't buy those issues. I have not read them.
What is it with you guys? You both buy Jank bought those comic books but hasn't read them.
Oh, Jank, they're amazing. Anyway.
And you both buy comic books and then never read them. What are you doing?
You realize, okay, this is why. Okay, because I have 1,000 unread comics, okay? And so whenever I buy a new one or a new collection, I have to like put it at the back of the list, because I have to read the other ones that I bought first. That's basically it.
Yep.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, I've got like 15,000 comics. It's not surprising that some of them I have not read yet.
Just a few more details about this Gaiman situation. One of the big things is like the hypocrisy of McFarlane here.
Exactly.
All these image guys, what they were saying when they were leaving Marvel was, we want to own our characters. If you create a character, you should own it in perpetuity. You know, it shouldn't be the company. Meanwhile, Gaiman comes in, creates a character, and then McFarlane takes it. Like,
ridiculous.
And the other thing, the reason Gaiman took him to court over all this was, I believe, he and McFarlane kind of made a deal where Gaiman said, all right, I'll forget about all that stuff you owe me about Angela if you trade me the rights to, what is it, Marvel Man? Is that
Miracle Man / Marvel Man, same character, yeah.
Because he thought McFarlane owned the rights, but technically, Mike-El, he did not own the rights. McFarlane only owned the rights to 2 logos. Yeah,
that's a slight discrepancy there.
Yeah,
okay.
And apparently, like, even McFarlane thought he owned more than that. Like you mentioned, he wasn't the smartest guy. I think this could be part of it as well.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So when Gaiman realized, wait, I'm only getting 2 logos out of this? Fuck that! I'm taking you to court. So that's when they all went to court. Okay. And then when Gaiman got the rights to Angela and everything, and he had to pay him money and stuff. And then Gaiman sold the rights to Marvel. He just sold them. Yeah, he just gave them to Marvel, sold them. So yeah, that's all that. All right, so now we got to.
So
go ahead.
He sold Angela to Marvel, but what about Marvel Man? That went straight to Marvel?
I don't know about Marvel Man. He did sell Angela.
I believe so. Yeah, that was put out by Marvel, those reprints and everything. So I think, they own that now.
Okay.
So we got to talk about another big controversy with McFarlane and Peter David at Comic Fest 1993. Peter David and Todd McFarlane had a public debate.
Oh,
are you guys aware of this?
I like those.
Basically, McFarlane was upset at the time at the way the media was representing Image Comics, and David wrote a regular column. I think it was called "But I Digress" and like Comic Box Guy. And he would often criticize the Image Comics. He would say that it was just a cash grab. It was money over quality, and that they and the Image, like Eric Larson and stuff, wrote an anonymous letter in saying they've made writers obsolete in their future. And these are just old dinosaurs, you know, all mad at the new youth coming in. So McFarlane challenged Peter David to a debate at Comic Fest 1993, and you can find videos of it. It's out there online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a video.
I need to watch this.
I didn't watch it because I don't know. When I was reading all about both these two, they sound insufferable, both of them. Just reading their personal lives, it just sounds like they're both really egotistical and just completely insufferable. So I didn't want to.
Well, it seems like you're challenging a writer to a talking competition. That doesn't seem like a good idea.
Yeah.
And you're Todd McFarlane, who's not the brightest bulb.
And I believe Todd McFarlane showed up like shirtless. I think he was wearing boxing trunks, like and young Peter David kind of looks like Ron Jeremy. If you pretty much Ron Jeremy.
That's fair.
So I really didn't want to watch it. But apparently they had 3. George Perez was the moderator, and they had 3 judges, and the judges scored it 2-1 for David. But David afterwards, he said he prepared for this extensively. He did a lot of work. He read like 4 books on debating, and he did mock debates with his family members and friends. And I have a feeling McFarlane just showed up, you know?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So
like, I got a costume. That's good enough.
So David won, but he said he felt bad afterwards because it just brought more attention to McFarlane, and he shouldn't have even did it. But I still don't know where their relationship is these days. But it's kind of sad that they worked on Hulk together, and now then they became like kind of rival enemies.
Yeah. I think that happened a lot, although at least some of them I think he patched up. Like I think Peter David and Joe Quesada, who he was working with on X Factor with for a while, like they had a falling out when Peter David left. But eventually I think they patched that back up again because, Joe Quesada was in charge of Marvel.
Yeah.
And Peter David continued to work there. So
didn't Quesada draw X Factor for a while?
Yep, that's what did it. Basically, he was always chronically behind, and like Peter David was pissed that he had to keep having these like shitty fill-in artists.
Okay. And then what else was I going to say about this? But David also had a big feud with Eric Larson, I guess. Another Image guy.
Yeah, I think it's Eric Larson. He was dissing his writing, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
something like that. He also
I'm sorry, but I think Peter David was making fun of Larson because he just said Savage Dragon is just Hulk with a fin on his head.
Oh, okay.
Which is pretty accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Accurate. Oh, I recently got into a feud with Eric Larson, but I did the
You're in a feud with Eric Larson?
I am also in a feud with Eric Larson. No, it consisted of one misunderstood, not misunderstood, but one tweet, and I got so pissed off I just blocked him. And it stopped him following on Twitter. I hope you're listening, Eric Larson. Anyway.
Yeah, I want to get Eric Larson on the show now so we can confront Mike-EL. It'll be like a Maury Povich situation. I'll say, hey, Mike-EL, this week I want to do a Batman issue. And then Mike-EL will show up all excited. And I'm like, just kidding, Mike-EL. Eric Larson, here he is. And then bring him.
Oh, boy. Anyway.
And by the way, Eric Larson followed McFarlane on Amazing Spider-Man. He took over for him after Spider-Man.
Right.
Yeah. It was a big dip in the artwork.
I remember when I first saw it, because he also followed McFarlane on Hulk for one issue. Did you know that? Yeah. The last issue of that story is Eric Larson. When I first saw it, I couldn't tell the difference, and then I realized I hated it. So.
Oh, by the way, we didn't mention the cover. We didn't mention the cover of Hulk 334. It's done by a fellow named Steve Geiger.
Right.
Geiger. And I guess he drew some Web of Spider-Man and some issues of Hulk. And that was pretty much it. But I don't know much about Steve Geiger.
No.
It's kind of a realistic.
7 was the year of the reader.
Oh.
This cover here.
And the cover is just Hulk punching through Half-Life's belly. He's putting his fist right through his belly. It's an okay cover. Nothing too great. But it seems like there's a lot of empty space, though. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's almost like they could add text, right? But they just decided not to, maybe.
Yeah, so it looks weird. But anyway. Yeah, so there it is, Hulk 334. I think that's everything. Anything else about McFarlane or David you'd like to say, Mike-EL?
No, I just, it was a pleasure to reread, these early issues. Again, not quite as good as the later ones, but I still enjoy them.
All right, so Mike-EL, 1 out of 10, what would you give it?
Ooh. I would give it I'd give it at least a 6, I think. At least. Maybe a 7. Like, it's pretty rough.
That's where I was thinking.
Holy hell.
I'd probably give it a 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go 6, yeah. I definitely can't go any lower than 5. 6 sounds good to me. It's got room for improvement, but, I like it. It was good.
You know what sounds good to me? 3. 3 sounds good to me. Not a fan of the writing. Not a fan of the writing, not a fan of the art. This was not good at all. But I did enjoy learning more about the Hulk, because I really don't know much about the Hulk. So I enjoyed doing the research and reading up on the Hulk. So that was something. And I do have a new favorite comic book character of all time, Ramon.
I want you to dress as Ramon for Halloween next year.
I'm dressed as Ramon right now.
Swinging medallion.
Yep.
I think everybody should read at least the Peter David McFarlane issues of the Hulk. I think those are great.
Yeah, I'm going to, because again, this is the first Peter David I've ever, so I'm going to have to go read some more Peter David, because I can't let this be my impression of Peter David.
Right.
This is bad.
It's better the more you read, because like I said, he does play the long game and really sets things up. The more you read,
here, like I said, the big picture stuff in this issue was great. That was well done. It's the smaller stuff that really was bad. But anyway.
And check out X Factor number 87, the one where they're just all in therapy. Like that's
I have that issue
right there.
I have that.
So good.
And I really like that issue.
Yeah. It's amazing.
You know what I just didn't like about that issue, and I haven't read it since it came out. So what was that? The 90s at some point?
Yeah, 90s.
But I still have one thing I remember from the issue, Jank. In Quicksilver, in his therapy session, he's putting together a puzzle of a snail. Do you remember this?
Yep.
And I get the symbolism of all that's great, but the puzzle is so childlike in the drawing. Like that puzzle.
It should have been like 400.
Yes. It should have been a really
It's hard to draw that though.
It was just so goofy. Like it was this big picture of a snail. Like like a 2-year-old could put it together in 5 seconds. And yeah, I don't know. It just seemed weird. But I get the symbolism of the snail in it because he was talking about how everything around him is so slow. So
good.
And I got to tell you, I really could empathize with it. I have that same feeling all the time.
Really?
It's very slow. I don't know. So how do I combat that? By taking naps. All right. So
that just checks out logically.
So Mike-EL, next week on the big show, I'm all confused, Mike-EL, because we're recording all these shows. The Batman show we did hasn't even been released yet, and
No, it has not. No, it's being released tomorrow. Yeah.
I'm very confused. So, but I think the next episode after this one here, this Hulk one, I think our buddy Cousin Brandon will be joining us, another guest. And because he's joining us, it'll count as one of my picks, and then you can have 2 picks in a row after that. But I believe Cousin Brandon wants to do Secret Wars issue 1.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'll be spectacular. I can't wait.
Forward to it.
So otherwise, Kevin Jank, good job, buddy.
Thanks. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on again. Maybe we can talk about Peter David again or some other.
Anytime.
Right.
I think he's honestly probably my favorite writer of comic books.
Okay.
Because he's the one guy who's kind of always solid. Like we didn't even talk about Spider-Man 2099 or Scarlet Spider or all these things he's done. They're all just solid.
Yep.
Yeah, his body of work is very extensive. Like we just touched on the highlights, and he's also done a lot of novels.
He did a great Hulk one in the 90s.
Yeah, and I think he did some maybe the Avengers novelizations of the movies or something, or I don't know.
We didn't even mention Star Trek. He did Star Trek novels, Star Trek comics, and they're awesome. Yeah.
Yep, Star Trek. But here's the other thing. He did all this work, and then he had to go do a GoFundMe because he wanted fans to pay for his back taxes. What the fuck?
Hey, I only gave him $50. Okay, so don't criticize.
No, you didn't.
No, I gave him money. I don't remember how much, but I did give him money. Yes, that was It was payback for all those awesome issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. Okay,
Mike-EL, I'm still paying my taxes from last year. Can you send me $50?
No, because you didn't write Aquaman.
But what have you done for me lately, Mike-DELL?
But come on, that's a real dick move. Don't pay your taxes and then ask your fans to pay them for you. That is fucking ridiculous. No.
Maybe you finish that comic book you're trying to write, and then we'll give you money.
There you go.
Pay your damn taxes. I just think that is ignorant beyond words. But anyway, all right. So, but Jank, we got to get you back on here to because Mike-EL, he was initially going to pick a Spider-Man issue. So maybe we'll bring you back to talk some Spider-Man.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything. Anytime.
All right, Jank. Thanks, buddy. And again, go to the LCS radio network and listen to Original Janksters. blogtalkradio.com/LCS. There you go.
Yeah, it's on sporadically.
Now, yes, we stick to our schedule, right, Mike-DELL? Every week.
Yeah, Jank is on that image schedule. Where sometimes, sometimes you hit the deadline, sometimes you don't. Who cares?
I had to draw feet this month. So it took a while.
Yeah, so he's a little late. But, all right, Mike-EL, I think we're done.
All right, that wraps it up then. Until next Tuesday night, this has been Flea Market Fantasy. See you next time.